Hey, Julia, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
For people listening on a podcast, I see a whole bunch of work behind Julia stacked up on the shelves. I guess they're like book form works that you've been doing. You see a whole bunch of stuff in my studio, even though it's been cleaned up. There's a lot of work still.
The work is always happening, right? Layer upon layer.
Yeah, and I like to let my work sit for a while, so even after what I think is a final layer, it's not really I don't decide that I don't sign it until it's really settled, which may take a couple of years. So
Have you ever let a piece go to the stewardship of another unsigned?
unsigned, that's a good question. I'm sure I have because Um, well, actually, all of my psalm paintings that we were kind enough to contribute to by reading the psalms that Dr. Ellen Davis translated, um, they're unsigned. Um, I don't feel like they're mine really, so I did not sign them. I wonder, I don't think if you work in a gallery, they insist obviously to authenticate the work, so you have to sign them. I might have shown pieces that are unsigned, but I don't think I've sold any pieces or even given it to people without signing.
Yeah.
How about you?
And in some ways, that protects your work in a different way.
Yeah, and if you're an artist, you want to put a copyright on it so that the copyright protection law will protect your work from being used in nefarious ways. But I do, yeah. So it's a complicated relationship, right? Do you actually own your work? And in many cases, I feel like I don't, but if you exhibiting and saying your name in front of it, then obviously you have to sign them.
Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder how this will advance throughout time because now they can prove Jackson Pollock splatter paintings because
Hmm.
they've done like
Hmm.
scientific analysis and measurement
Hmm.
that only his body at that angle could have produced that splatter, right?
Incredible.
And because there's such extensive documentation of the process of making now by many artists,
Yeah.
I wonder if a signature
Yeah.
is still
Mm.
the needed mechanism of authentication.
That is a great question. And you're right that today forensic, sciences have given this new possibility of authenticating a work of art. And a friend of mine embeds his hair into his photographs. Actually, he actually has a way of putting his DNA.
That
And
was really popular mechanism with Thomas Kincaid.
right, is that right? I don't know that about Kincaid's
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
Yeah. So people have done this, but now, people advise artists to document their work to uh, add a level of, this is done by authentically done at a certain time. So I don't know. It's a really good question because art it kind of depends on copyright in order, that for example, we hear of Shakespeare and we assume that that was very popular and therefore they remain popular, but he devised his own way of copywriting his plays. And in a sense, that's why we hear of Shakespeare today, because they protected the original material from being copied, and the name was assigned to it in a sense. So and copyright laws in the United States. didn't come to be for plays in early 20th century, I believe. And we can't think of a single American playwright before that happened. So it's kind of important, but to your point, there are many ways that we are grappling with new realities and new technologies today.
Yeah. So fascinating to think about. So what's new? What are you seeing? What are you observing? What are you feasting on? Jacob
Yeah,
wrote such a beautiful
isn't it?
response in the newsletter this month. And
It,
it just,
it is. He's becoming just if you look back on the newsletters for the past year or so, you can see this incremental growth of a writer, really, and somebody who is really good at editing newsletters, but also thinking through on these themes. And yeah, he really created a framework for what a feast is and how we might think about them. And so, very, very beautifully written. And we did have a Fujifilm feast the end of last month. Invited about 150 people who were supporters of Embers International, and it was Hejan's 50th birthday, so it was an excuse, and our fifth anniversary of journey together as a married couple. So it was appropriate to celebrate, but it was also quite wonderful to put my art in the context of that, right? To place, I've been to obviously I've done many exhibits and galleries and museums, but I really felt like this was the place where your art can be presented in a certain way that adds to the feast, and it's nice that art belongs in that communal sense, right? For um, purpose beyond itself, like this was to benefit the children that we serve in Southeast Asia, and um, so the whole point was to create, um, and I exhibited pieces that I rarely exhibit too. So because the whole point was not about me, it was about celebrating and giving away in a sense that beauty that leads to justice. And when you do that, it actually liberates the expression. And it was just fun to be obviously with friends, and obviously it's still difficult to get together, right? So there's uh, every time you can do that, you feel like you're celebrating something miraculous. All my kids were there, and obviously meant a lot to me, but it also was an indication that this is not just, friends and supporters of Embers, but it was a family affair as well. So we just learned many things in our newsletter. I write about this, and Jacob picked it up in his essay. And for those listening who hasn't signed up for the newsletter, it's free, and you can go to iamculturecare.com/news to just sign up, and it's a great way to be part of a um, communal, way of celebrating each other, letting each other know we have a wonderful also essay from Megan, used to be Richie, now Mitz, who talks about her residency that she created in Texas, and here's someone who's literally worked for culture care over the years in New York City, and now developing her own culture care entity, right? So it's really great to see, and yeah, and I think the feasting part, there's a lot to think about there.
yeah, because Jacob frameworked it with activity, occasion, spirit, and effect, right? And that four-part foundation
Yeah,
or how we can think of
yeah,
feasting and celebration
yeah,
and community.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Exactly.
interesting. It's not about eating food, you know, even though it's a feast, right? That's what I think is great about his piece is like, yeah, it's about all these things, and of course you want to have a, you want to think through on the menu and all that, but it's really not about that. It's about gathering and really feeling like you fit into something bigger than yourself and celebrating that. And the spirit of it, the kind of coming together intentionally to encourage each other or and there were artists there and we set up this tent and what was cool was artists and children they stayed until the end because we had so much fun and we were having a typical I am culture care table way in the back, right? Nobody sees us introverts getting together, but we had this really beautiful discussion. Kids were running out, it was getting dark. And one of the kids is very feelings driven, and he said, "I am actually angry that this has to end." And artists feel like that, right? We're like, it's just beginning. This is just beginning, and that was really special.
Yeah. And there is room for anger in the making as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's sometimes the entry point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So wonderful to think about that and
yeah,
all the feasting that we can envision, right? Like
yeah.
there's so many different entrance points
Hmm.
to another reality. We live in a time that is so concussive in
Yes.
its verbiage and the assault that humans have placed on each other. And I'm like, it is the year of the Lord 2025. Acting in this way is understandable historically
Yes.
and shows a distinct lack of imagination for
Mm.
what can happen.
Oh, yes, yes. So good. I mean, you're really naming something that all of us feel right now. We are lost, confused, angry. We are scared. We are anxious. And what we forget, and the art world is like the worst of the symptoms, right? Like you don't think about the art world as a place of safety.
Mm,
Like when did that switch take place? Like how could it be that art world cannot provide this way of what we will call fellowship or what we will call even a feasting of abundance. It has become this game that we play, uh, scandalous, transgressive, this way that we have learned to how to survive, basically, um, screaming into the void. But when we kind of pull back, and especially when we look at it from cultural care perspective, you kind of have to ask, like, okay, is there an alternative? You know, can there be an antidote to what we are all feeling is broken? It's not working, and to me, um, reconnecting ourselves to certain virtues of communal path, along with that, connecting to nature um, through our work, and sometimes inhabiting art in nature, right? And those gestures are more important than ever because we have lost touch with nature, certainly, but also with ourselves. We have become atomized and digitized and disposable culture. And can we create a way forward that takes in generational aspects of making to be able to also celebrate, but has the breadth and depth that can capture our angst as well, because right now it just seems like even as much as we can scream about what is wrong, I'd be angry and transgressive, that doesn't go anywhere. It kind of hits a wall and then it dissipates immediately. And you have to kind of keep in this cycle. The more irrational, the better kind of a thing. And that's not sustainable, obviously. So, what do we think about? I was just at my opening at Golden College, your your school that you went to in near Boston, and we were reflecting on how, because there were young people there, interface with my work and Bruce's work, Bruce Herman, whose work I wanted to exhibit alongside mine because we have been journeying together. And Bruce is the founder of art department at Golden College, so naturally, I wanted to honor him. But at the same time, we felt like there was this new generation arising that is asking the right questions. They see the reality that is, the old wineskin literally breaking apart, and they want a new language, a cultural language that will help them to develop, mature as artists and students into a world that's more integrated, that is asking questions that are still hard and maybe even impossible to answer, but they want to do it with each other rather than just fighting for your turf. And so it's I think there's a interesting conversation to be had, this cultural care conversation given to college first year college student. What would that be? How would they create something that is more imaginative? As as you noted, it's a lack of imagination on our generation to be fighting culture wars as a solution to the problems.
Yeah.
That is a sheer lack of imagination because you're assuming a scarcity model into the universe. And you're saying, well, this is the only way to preserve what we value. But that's not true at all, given the framework of, especially if you're anything religious in framework of any of world religions, that is not the framework, unless you're Buddhist and you assume everything's an illusion. It's then maybe you can justify a little bit of it, but Buddhist seems to not be interested in culture wars, so it's the opposite. What we proclaim to be, this is the truth, this is certain to be right. Is exactly the opposite of the fruit of the spirit, as the biblical language will say, that will create abundance and that will create, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. We don't see any of that in culture at large. So here's an opportunity, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's something that I've been wrestling with in my own work. I'm like, yes, you're praying this work out into the world and you're hopeful,
Mm,
and you're still doing it as a reactionary mechanism
mm,
to the
mm,
culture war.
mm.
What does it mean to completely escape that
Right.
or create a different trajectory in some way? Because I'm still in that
Mm,
reactionary space, even as it appears that I'm on a different
yeah.
tack.
Yeah. Well, I wonder though, Judy, I mean, I look at your work and perhaps it starts there, but it obviously is not about that, right? That you're creating a generative space and when I see your work, hold it in my hands, there's something to be held that has maybe you're answering your own questions in a way, your intuition is going ahead of you. And that's also something really powerful about art and conversations like this, where you get to see each other's work and you feel a certain way. I mean, you oftentimes I come into the studio not feeling like, I'm going to be creative, but it's that daily discipline, right, of going through the motions and this liturgy of making, which I fortunately have to have because of the Nihonga materials. It's like takes an hour to create ink. But then you realize that apart from your feelings, at that moment, you're part of this flow that has been given to us through generations of artisans and artisans. And we what we do with our hands kind of know better than we do. you know. So I think we can see that in each other better than we can see it ourselves. Sometimes we can be really just so caught up in what we're doing that we can't, zoom back and say, well, I see this. And I think that sort of thing can happen in a safe environment where there is feasting, there is a gathering of based on trust and joy, a family affair rather than, affairs, and that kind of movement toward in integration and connection is something that can create enduring work long term. That's what I learned with my relationship with Bruce and others that have journeyed with me, like Susie Barra, who just won the Pulitzer, but she and I have been collaborating. I know it's amazing, and she and I, and he is a faithful person who has felt called to do compose in a certain way. And there are times when it just seems like, nobody was interested in this.
Mm.
And now all of a sudden, she's like way too busy. But I wonder if that kind of persistence and courage to continue to create the way you have been called to create, that also is a result of relationship, friendships, communal reality.
Mm. And something I was reflecting on as you were speaking is the distinction between the intuitive making versus intellectual making,
Mm. Right. Right.
and leaning towards the intuitive because that is the knowledge beyond.
Yeah, I I I don't know if it's so much a binary, but I often talk it.
Or it's integrated
Right, right,
somehow.
right. And I'm preaching myself because I often say that, intuitive versus rational, and I wonder if the intuitive needs to be reframed in terms of the rational.
Mm,
Like, because you can't really have rational, and I've been thinking about this recently because, all the conspiracy stuff that seems to be taking over. But, what people think as rational is based on something, right? Too.
yes,
It's based on a belief system, really.
yes,
And so when you look at reality, like you look at it, quantum mechanics or whatever, it seems like everything is in play. There's flux, there's, kind of subjective, perception and objective reality, and no one knows where the line is, right? And so, but what we also know as artists is that somehow the practice of making our hands, the somatic knowledge, moves beyond sometimes the rational. Like
mm,
it pushes the kind of up against it, and then it it invites the rational into another mystery rather than certainty,
yes,
say. And that is an interesting place, where an artist is hitting something, that is really, really formative, and scary. You know, you feel like you're just jumping off the abyss at that moment because you're not quite sure if you know the outcome,
Mm,
what you're about to create, and yet I have found that those are the moments when I can actually let my hands and actually let the materials guide me.
mm,
And I'm able to, jump in there because the materials guiding me to do certain things that I didn't know was possible.
mhm,
And it's scary, but then it's exciting. And there are certainly many failures that come out of that, right? So it's not like all lined up. But I wonder if that's the kind of exploration that we can allow each other if we had a safe environment to create and to do new things.
yeah. How do we get comfortable enough to
Yeah.
be in that nebulous space of trying?
Yeah, right. And willing to fail at
Yeah.
something which we all have to do if you're trying to grow our wings into a new reality. There's no way you can avoid that. But at the same time, people watching you who know that that's part of the journey, um, can be so uplifting and encouraging, right? And that's what essentially I think I am cultural care groups should be like, whether it be two people meeting for coffee every month, or a gathering of friends, or church fellowship, or whatever that may be. um, it's to really see each other from a commitment that we make toward making, that this is a craft that I want to invest myself into, or a journey that I'm going to commit to. I'm going to write a play, I'm going to make art. I'm going to be a chef, or whatever that may be. You kind of, it's an accountability group to say, hey, where are you? You said this a month ago. How was your month?
Mhm.
That kind of question to keep us, keep going, right? To just simply take that another step this month. Or if you try something and it fails, then we're like, applaud. Like this is a celebration. Like, who gets to do that? Who gets to fail? And that takes creativity, right? To be able to harness that reality, taking a risk, because you're actually what you're learning in taking, failing, is that you're learning to take risks, right? You're learning to step forward when the culture at large is paralyzed. Politics is paralyzed. Everything is like standstill and only seems degenerate, every time we look at the news. But we can actually individually experience this outcome that is far more creative, imaginative, generative, that creates something literally new into the world. But we need each other because that takes, it's like crossing a threshold, and it takes courage and it takes energy.
Yeah. Bravery, courage, energy, vulnerability, all of that
Yeah.
are skills that we can develop in community
Right.
and have enough bolstering around us, as it were,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
enough of a buffer and enough of a safe zone
Yeah, that's right.
to take that
Yeah.
leap.
And food helps too.
And communal resources
Yes.
of a different sort. It's not always monetary, as
No.
you've so clearly articulated. Like it's sometimes it's that verbal assistance,
Yeah.
sometimes it's that verbal accountability.
Yeah,
It,
that's right.
it takes all forms. We're not strictly talking about some kind of monetary
It's not
deal,
transactional.
right?
It's not
Yeah.
transactional at all because you kind of like giving yourself away in a sense. And then if others give themselves away, then there's a cycle of power, I guess, that, and then other people looking at that would say, what? That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist in the world. That doesn't exist in our world. Um, what's going on? This this enigmatic reality, and yet, in deep in your hearts that, oh, this is what I'm made for. This is the community that I want to belong. This is the tribe that will allow me to push forward in my journey. This is home. This is what I want to come back to. And those experiences, because there's so little of it that, out there, every place that used to be that is now been broken apart.
Mhm.
It's time for artists to think about how do we lead into that, rather than complaining about it. Um, Create one, create a friendship, create ways to, um, even, we have technology like this to capture some of this. And, there's always more robust ways where we can gather and do things, but it could be, like we don't call each other anymore, like it could be like we pick up a phone and, like actually just a friend called me because of 9/11, and it was very sweet. He was just thinking of me, and it meant the world to me that this friend who was in Colorado just picked up the phone and called me, and so these are not grand gestures. It's very simple, and I think artists we can start to think about that as a form of communication that that might be a new wineskin, and what is breaking apart.
And you have the opportunity in these upcoming weeks to share your work in different ways. You're headed to Hong Kong,
Yes.
Taiwan.
Yes, of all places, right? Why not? And this has been planned for 5 years, but now a museum show in Taiwan, and I think it's quite appropriate. And we go through Hong Kong and then to Southeast Asia, where we serve these children and mothers, and it's going to be an amazing 3 weeks.
What a gift. And then your book comes out.
Yeah, I know. Here it is. I mean, this,
Wow.
this
Look
is
at it. Look at
so,
that gilded cover.
I know. And this, Jennifer Banks, my editor, brought this to me at the feast. So, so we were like, freaking out because it's just so much more beautiful than I imagined, and the designer Dustin Kilgore is just amazing at framing, pages and these little things that I painted, is now part of this, and it's just something that here's a dandelion. My chapter on my repentance on hating dandelions to loving them. So I'm still on my way, but I am so grateful for yeah, those things. So yeah.
So good. I've pre-ordered my copy. I can't wait to
Oh,
get
thank
it.
you. Yeah,
So
thank you. Yeah,
you all can pre-order your copies too,
that's right.
wherever you find books.
Yes, yes, yeah. Art is a journey into the light. Yeah, press.
So good. Thanks for talking, Mako.
Okay, yeah, good to see you.
Take
And
care.
I'll report back.
Okay.